Okay, well, I'd like to welcome everybody today. Thank you so much for being here. We're in for a real treat to have such distinguished guests with us. I'm going to take some time to introduce uh, the series and our guests today, and then we'll go into the 5-minute talks, uh, introducing their work and their relationship to failure in their work. And then we'll follow that up with a conversation about the work and about the interrelationships between each of these individuals and how that all plays out. So first of all, I'd like to just kind of read this brief introduction about the panel discussion and about this series, and then I'll go in and introduce each of the panelists. So the nature of design is usually iterative, evolutionary, sometimes unpredictable. This means that designers need either to embrace unexpected results and/or they need to learn from them. Either way, decisions are required that excuse me, I'm getting a lot of notifications on my phone here when I'm trying to read here. Either way, decisions are required at a juncture where you achieve undesired or less effective results. We are interested in dissecting the design process to understand how different designers handle this pivotal moment. With a client, there are constraints that may seem unacceptable in terms of a certain aesthetic sensibility, or there may be external circumstances that impact a project negatively. We seek to understand how our distinguished panel has navigated such challenges. At a much larger scale, within a young designer's life, there are events that take place that are undesirable from the perspective of a previously stated goal. We seek to help our students gain understanding about how role models in the world of design have dealt with such setbacks. All of these scenarios and more are under consideration. We are looking forward to hosting a dialogue with our panelists, looking at their work and the ways in which their work have been enhanced as they have worked through these and other challenges and failures, turning lemons into lemonade. So with that, no delay, we'll get into the biographies of our individual panelists so that we can kind of get a sense of who we'll be talking with today. So I'd like to just start in order here on the slides with Elizabeth Gerber's biography. Welcome, Elizabeth. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you for inviting me.
It's really wonderful to have you. Elizabeth Gerber is the co-director for the Center for Human-Computer Interactions and Design and a professor of mechanical engineering and computer science. She's also a professor of communication studies. In the face of increasingly complex challenges like healthcare access and environmental collapse, we need dramatic and sustainable innovation. The driving question behind her research is how new technology can support the innovation process. In particular, she examines what she defines as a collective innovation, an innovation process that harnesses the diverse and untapped human, social, and economic capital from distributed networks to discover, evaluate, and implement new ideas. Open, ubiquitous social technical infrastructure support collective innovation, affording greater speed and deeper and broader participation. While collective innovation has the potential to massively transform society, it is poorly understood. She uses qualitative, quantitative, and design research methods to establish theory, contribute design principles, and develop infrastructure for collective innovation. Her pioneering scholarship leads the academic understanding of this fast-evolving, scalable infrastructure and directly contributes to its improved functioning to benefit society at large. So thank you, Elizabeth. Now I'd like to introduce our next panelist, who is, pardon me for butchering your pronunciation, but Mariana Amatillo. She's the Vice Provost and Academic Dean for Continuing and Professional Education at Parsons the New School of Design in New York City. A practitioner scholar academic administrator, and design strategist, Mariana joined the new school as full-time faculty in the School of Design Strategies, or SDS, at Parsons in 2017. In addition to her teaching at SDS, where she is also part of the core faculty of the university's graduate minor in civic service design, she's also the vice provost and academic dean for continuing and professional education at the new school. In this role, she provides academic leadership, strategic integration, and development for the CPE, or the Continuing and Professional Education Program. Her work encompasses integrating academic development and academic administrative functions for the division to operate as a continued source of teaching and learning innovation, new partnerships, profitability, and sustainability. A recent focus has been to scale the university's executive education division line in the new school's preeminence in the creative and design fields. Prior to joining the new school, Mariana led the award-winning Social Innovations Department, Design Matters, at Art Center College of Design in Pasadena, California, which she co-founded in 2001. Mariana writes and lectures internationally about design, design management, and social innovation, and serves on a variety of international juries and executive and advisory boards in design and the arts. She serves on the board of the Aalto University in Finland and is an honorary president of the Cumulus Association, the leading global association of art and design education and research from 2019 to 2022, and 2 terms as a board member there. Mariana's academic research and publishing bridges the design and management fields and examines the role of a design attitude as a cognitive approach to the social innovation and organizational learning. Her editorial projects include Design for Social Innovation, a case study from around the world, etc. She holds a PhD in Management, Design and Sustainable Systems from Case Western Reserve, and a master's degree in Art History and Museum Studies from the University of Southern California. She's also a license and letters degree from the Sorbonne University in Paris, where she also studied art history at the École des Louvre. A native of Argentina and the child of a diplomat, Mariana grew up around the world. Let's welcome Mariana. Thank you.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Thank you. And then we'll move on to Philip Beesley. Philip Beesley, he's primary investigator and scaffolds leader at the School of Architecture at University of Waterloo in Canada, outside Toronto. Philip Beesley is a practicing visual artist, architect, and professor in architecture at the University of Waterloo, and professor of digital design and architecture and urbanism at the European Graduate School. Beesley's work is widely cited in contemporary art and architecture, focused in the rapidly expanding technology and culture of responsive and interactive systems. He serves as the director for the Living Architectural Systems Group and as director for Riverside Architectural Press. His Toronto-based practice, Phil Beesley Studio Incorporated, works in numerous questions, including long-standing exchanges with Iris van Herpen, Salvador Breed, Rob Gorbet, and Matt Gorbet. Philip Beesley leads the LASIG, or the Living Architectural Systems Group partnership, and the Scaffolds research stream. As the leader of numerous collaborative projects, Beesley has senior level experience in managing large, complex, multidisciplinary teams and large-scale public architecture. Work resulting from the previous partnerships were presented in several public venues, including the 2012 Biennale in Sydney, and as a professor at the University of Waterloo School of Architecture, he has mentored more than 1,500 architecture students. He has authored and edited 19 books and has been the chair of numerous symposia and conferences. Let's welcome Philip Beesley.
Very glad to be here. Thank you.
And then um, last but not least, we'd like to welcome Matias Del Campo. Dr. Campo is a registered architect, designer, and educator. He is an associate professor of the Taubman College of Architecture and Urban Planning, University of Michigan, and director of April, the Architecture and Artificial Intelligence Laboratory at University of Michigan. He conducts research and advanced design methods in architecture preliminarily through the application of artificial intelligence techniques in collaboration with the computer science department and the Michigan Robotics, of which he is also an affiliate faculty member. Matias Del Campo is the co-founder of the architectural practice SPAN. Their award-winning architectural designs are informed by advanced geometry, computational methodologies, and philosophical inquiries. SPAN gained wide recognition for the design of the Austrian pavilion at the 2010 Shanghai World Expo, and more recently for the Robot Garden at the Ford Robotics Building. SPAN's work was featured at the Venice Architectural Biennale in 2012 and 2021, Archilab 2013, and the Architectural Biennale of Venice in Vienna and Buenos Aires in 2019. He was awarded the Accelerate CERN Fellowship, the AIA Studio Prize, and was elected into the boards of directors of Acadia and the International Journal of Architecture Computing. Solo shows include Formations at the MAC in Vienna and the exhibition Sublime Bodies at the Fab Union Gallery in Shanghai. And in 2013, SPAN expanded its operation to Shanghai, China, where the practice is currently working on building projects of various scales. He earned his Master's of Architecture from the University of Applied Arts in Vienna and his PhD from the Royal Melbourne Institute of Technology. Let's welcome Matias.
Thank you very much for the invitation.
So we're really grateful that we have such a distinguished panel with us, and we think that this is going to be very important and influential on the students that we have with us, and also we are recording this for posterity's sake, and this will go into the IU archives. It's been wonderful to connect with all of you leading up to this discussion. It's been kind of 6 months in the planning, and so thank you for all of you kind of working through all of those processes with us and all the things that have gone into making sure that today's a success. And so we're very happy that that's happened. Just a quick housekeeping item. It's important to note that we really do need to keep the initial presentations to 5 minutes, just in order to maximize the opportunity for dialogue and conversation amongst ourselves afterwards. So I just wanted to apologize to Mariana because I've sped up your video just a tad so that we can get through it quicker. And then in terms of Philip and Matias, who are going to be doing their 5-minute presentations live, I will cut you off at 5 minutes or 5 minutes and 10 seconds. So don't feel don't have hard feelings because of that. But that way it'll allow us to get into the conversation and really get into the meat of the matters more quickly. So without any further delay, I'm just going to go ahead and start these presentations, and we'll go from there.
Hello, everyone. My name is Mariana Matulo. I'm joining you from New York City and Parsons School of Design, and I want to say thank you for including me in this terrific design speaker series, Failure, an Asset in the Design Process. I'll be sharing today just a little bit of my background and a project, and hopefully that is a source of inspiration and further discussion as we move forward in the series. The question that we were given to reflect on, how have you used project failures to your advantage, is a terrific provocation. And indeed, working for the last 20 years, conceiving, managing, and facilitating projects and writing about them in design for social innovation has given me a front row seat in terms of the role of failure and, more importantly, the role of experimentation in design when you're doing work that has an aspiration for social change. I've been, just very briefly in terms of my background, I've had the privilege to join Parsons School of Design since 2017 as an associate professor of strategic design and management, and I have been serving in different roles at the university level, at the new school since then. And my academic trajectory has really been defined by a field that is very transdisciplinary in design, but it's really has been focused on questions of the intersection of the big issues that affect us as human beings and in a finite planet, and the agency of design to make a difference as it intersects with these big issues. So before joining Parsons, I spent 17 years as the co-founder and lead of a program you may have heard of, Design Matters, and today's project that I will share comes from that portfolio. Part of my work is very connected to teaching, lecturing around the world, and also publishing about case studies and about the field of design for social innovation. And here are some just images of some of my publications and contributions to current publications. The latest one I've had the opportunity to co-edit with Brian Boyer, Jennifer May, and Andrew Shea is a look at projects in design for social innovation around the world with many case studies, where we were interrogating this question of how does this practice become successful and sustainable? And the question of failure has come up in some of these cases. So I invite you to check out the website of the book and some of the open source materials connected to the book. And before I share the project, I wanted just to share my lens on how I think about design, and in that very influenced by one of my mentors with whom I did my PhD in design and systems and management, Richard Buchanan, who's been really a scholar of design, bringing a very humanistic sort of lens about design. And this definition of design that is up on the screen: design is the way we plan and create the complex wholes that provide a framework for human culture, the human systems and subsystems that either work in congress or conflict with nature to support human fulfillment. I think this definition is important as we think about this panel series, because it really connects our disciplines with this idea of a systems view and a human based view on how we can, again, have agency and progress, but also be in situations that are really complex and contradictory. And I saw, as I mentioned earlier, a lot of this work as the co-founder of Design Matters, where in the span of 15 years or so, we were working with students and faculty at the undergrad and grad level, and many community-based organizations, UN organizations, and also the private sector in thinking about design implementable outcomes beyond the studio walls of our design school. And so, connected to failure, a concrete project I want to share is this project that won many awards that you can look up, called Giradora, which came out of an initiative called Safe Agua. And again, lots of documentation in the Design Matters site. This is work by wonderful alums now from Art Center. They were studying product design and environmental design, the work of Alex, Mariana Prieto, and Kim Chow. And they developed this product as part of this initiative where we were doing field research in human settlements in Latin America. This was work in a community outside Lima, Peru. And the brief of the project was to look at innovation for community members who work in and live in situations where there's no running water. And we were looking at how might we create services, products, and artifacts that can help the quality of life of someone who is relying on water to be delivered by truck in a mountainous terrain every once a week or so. And the concept of Giradora and what the outcome, that won many awards and grant projects for the team was this idea of a human-powered washer and spin dryer, really using this idea of almost of a salad spinner to not only wash clothing, but also dry clothing. And it was a very ingenious product that was done after a lot of research, and eventually ended up being tested, implemented in Mexico. The team, created a social enterprise, and one of the photos in this slide shows the Giradora beyond the prototype level being marketed in a rural community of Mexico. The story of failure around Giradora is one connected to the importance of field research and prototyping. The team originally had a concept where they were looking at a dryer idea, a washer idea, and they were not really thinking about the drying part of the project, and they were thinking that they would, shape a second product. The image from the bottom that you see is the Mariana, one of the students in the field, were working with community members, testing the first prototype plunger ideas, and then really working through feedback where they clearly heard that this was not, a good idea, and that in fact combining some of the product ideas they had would advance the utility of the project. So in many ways, you could say that the experimentation connected to the first product ideas failed, but also succeeded in that it really pushed the team to go back to the drawing board, take that feedback, and really push the idea back to what became this prototype. So the lesson there is that really it's important to think about failing, not necessarily with the Silicon Valley idea of failing fast and failing better, which definitely is important in design, but that it's also important to think about the learning and the experimentation that is needed when you're trying to design and solve for complex problems. And that in social innovation design is a requisite, because you really need that participatory system of feedback loops and work with community if you are going to impact, aspire to come up with something that is more than a shining object, an artifact that will see the light of day. So I want to leave with that conviction that, again, it's failing is about experimenting, and it's really about putting in place processes for feedback loops and dialogues, and understanding that really the futures we are putting together as designers need to be plural, and that design is a really optimistic endeavor as we think about imagination and human dignity, and how we approach failure as a mode of experimentation and learning. Thank you very much.
In the last 24 hours, I've had 2 papers rejected for publication and a grant proposal rejected. My name's Liz Gerber, and I'm in the discovery business. The faster I fail, the faster I succeed. If I'm not failing, it's a sign that I'm not sufficiently pushing myself. I'm not challenging my limits. This is not how I want to live. So, given that failure is part of my life, I must love it, right? Wrong. I hate failure. I despise it. It feels awful. It stings every time. I even disdain the letter F just by association. But given that it's part of my life, I've had to come up with a reliable way to deal with it. There are 4 steps. 1. F. Feel sad, rotten, shameful, embarrassed, angry, resentful, whatever. I try to bring on all the feelings, and then I try and let them go. I imagine the feelings are just like the ocean wave crashing over me. It's not pleasant, but I know I must let them come. Holding waves back from crashing is not possible. But what is possible is to not be defined by them. They're just feelings. Step 2, A, accept failure as a necessary part of success. I've been rejected from many jobs. I've had dozens of products fail. I failed to place in many competitions. My nonprofit came very close to its end in 2020. And it turns out I'm not alone. Apple came close to bankruptcy in the 1990s. James Dyson suffered through over 5,000 failed prototypes before he landed on the first working Dyson vacuum. Jerry Seinfeld was booed off stage in his first stand-up comedy appearance. Harry Potter was rejected by 12 publishers. Walt Disney was fired from the Kansas City Star because the editor felt he, quote, lacked imagination and had no good ideas. Steven Spielberg was rejected from the University of Southern California of Cinematic Arts multiple times before eventually being accepted. Star Wars was rejected by several film studios for being too unconventional and risky. Basketball legend Michael Jordan observed, I've missed more than 9,000 shots in my career. I've lost almost 300 games. 26 times I've been trusted to take the game-winning shot and I missed. I failed over and over and over again in my life, and that is why I succeed. Everyone fails. All of the time. We just don't talk about it. Step 3, I, ignite purpose. My purpose is to be an effective leader, to inspire others to think, feel, behave differently to achieve positive change in their communities. I remind myself of my core values, which are relationships, independence, health, creativity, and excitement. I remind myself of my strengths. I take charge. I speak up. I make sure others are heard. I'm a catalyst. I make decisions. I turn ideas into actions. I energize groups to do important, meaningful work. Igniting purpose reminds me of my long-term goals. It motivates me to get back up, to try again after I've failed. Step 4, learn from failure. Ask a lot of questions. Did I not complete a process? Do I have the necessary skills to do this? Is the task too difficult to be done reliably? Were there unavoidable events I didn't foresee? What did I learn about my idea or design? What do I know now that I didn't know before? What am I going to do differently next time? Can I create new opportunities for experimenting? How can I share this learning with others so that they might avoid making the same mistake in the future? Or how can I share it with others so that they know they're not alone when they make the same mistake in the future? Well, 4 steps, FAIL, feel, accept, ignite, learn. Now it's time for me to get back to the business, which requires failing.
That was wonderful. Both of those were wonderful. Thank you so much. Such great sentiments, right? Okay, so now I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that let's see, let's have who's going to go next? Let's Philip, can you go next for us, please?
Sure thing. Hi, colleagues. I'm going to focus on a very particular small detail, which catastrophically failed in past installations. And I'm going to try to describe that as a passage from rigidity into flexibility. The detail was used in very large overarching canopies and structures that were used for immersive architecture. And you can see the little elements here, and perhaps you can see that the individual laser cut element was designed to be clipped together and to make vast numbers of links. There are like 500,000 parts in some of these installations. So there was a lot of heat on this, and this kind of catastrophic failure happened repeatedly in a couple of earlier installations that was after flying across the world and bringing cases and cases of these elements. We were really in trouble. Trying to understand what was happening, we realized that we'd been thinking about this kind of organization as being a rather rigid kind of jigsaw-like component, making these flexible grid works and nesting them very tightly together. Those were very good intentions. But what we hadn't grasped was just how much force was happening on each individual element, and also how much twisting and how much resiliency was actually required. It wasn't simply a jigsaw puzzle. It wasn't simply an element tiling together, but rather it was a deeply dynamic individual thing, which was subjected to all kinds of forces, buffeting back and forth. So as a result of not being able to do what we thought, we couldn't possibly do the kind of beautiful, freeform, crystalline structures, we started working instead with trying to understand how resilient structures would go together, things that weren't as pure as complete crystalline elements. And in doing that, we started to develop some very flexible joints as well, alongside rigid elements. You can see some of the silicon clipped into the thermally formed acrylic here, and some of the tessellations here. Tessellations meaning many individual jigsaw-like pieces clipping together, but with quite flexible cartilage-like elements between. We also started to try to see how we could draw out the forces where individual elements, rather than being conceived as rigid, would be something that had a continuous gradient of flexibility right to the very edge of its individual profile. And that produced a completely different kind of component. Instead of something that was strong and rigid that could clip together, we started to discover that there was remarkable kind of precarity where actually there was a lovely quality of not being able to predict where things would land, instead harvesting in its amount of forces. And that produced a very interesting new kind of class of material where on one hand, we could array things together into great strong nests of material, like you can see in this modeling, really muscular scaffolds that could handle things. But at the same time, they had very delicate clouds of material accumulating them around them as well. And this kind of combination of extremely strong, rigid, cave-like sanctuaries, but also the ability for things to vibrate and to shift and to exchange and to be able to move in a myriad of ways really resulted in a very different conception of architecture rather than the one that we'd inherited, in which we thought that it was important to be secure and permanent and rigid and only simply reliable against the world. That's resulted in quite a new conception of what architecture can be, most certainly providing a kind of affirmatus. I'm referring to Vitruvius when I say that word, the meaning of making something strong and reliable, a fundament of the word, but also harvesting in multiple vibrations and really immersing ourselves in continually changing work. That combination then has sometimes resulted in a sense of deep wilderness, and sometimes has resulted almost in a sense of releasing ourselves into a dreamlike space in which elements are really playing out their possibilities. And I want to emphasize that this is not a binary quality where it's all or nothing. Sometimes we really need to have strong shells around ourselves where things are as rigid and clear and peaceful as possible. But sometimes we need to feel like our world is radically open, where things are washing through us and which we're identified with the entire milieu. This combination of qualities might be called homeostasis, a quality of living things in which we define ourselves as much with the surroundings as with ourselves. And it really works rather against classical physics. When we think of classical physics, we might think of the sense that everything starts in order, but then ultimately dies and spreads out into disorder. That's really what I'm quoting, the second law of thermodynamics when I say that is things will reach absolute zero eventually. But the sense that there are standing waves in the world, that in an open systems with the solar energy, with the energy of the water, the energy of the ether even, and the stardust washing through us, that standing waves really are very resilient, is one that's been completely transformed by contemporary physics, in which living systems not only need to hold on to themselves and create walls and rigid structures around them, but they can also have a kind of a festival of creating disorder as well, harvesting entropy and growing continually. This flux that moves in between the need to make something strong and something weak is something that has really been a teacher to us. And it starts fundamentally from the lessons that have resulted from the failures that I described at the beginning. So I hope that that might be a contribution, a sense that through listening very, very carefully to materials and looking at how they in their own natures twist and turn and vibrate and oscillate, that we can create a tremendously resilient, sustainable new architecture.
Thank you, Philip. Appreciate that. Go ahead, Matias.
Yeah, hello everyone. Let me first apologize for my failure to provide a video in time so that you can see it, but I was actually able to do one very quickly, and I'm gonna quickly share that with you.
Thank you very much for the generous invitation to participate in this roundtable discussion today, titled Failure as an Asset in the Design Process. My thanks go to the organizers of this event and the faculty and students of the Indiana University. Today, we embark on a journey to explore a concept often shunned in our profession, but rich in intact potential. Failure as an asset in the architectural design process. As we delve into this discussion, we'll traverse the realms of neuroscience, literature, theater, and history to uncover how failure, when embraced, can serve as a catalyst for innovation, creativity, and ultimately, success. In recent years, advancements in neuroscience have shed light on the fascinating interplay between failure and creativity. Consider the phenomenon of hallucinations in neural networks, where errors in processing information lead to unexpected outcomes. Just as neural networks produce novel patterns through errors, the human mind interprets failures as stimuli for creative thought. By embracing these deviations from the norm, architects can tap into the subconscious realms of creativity, birthing innovative design solutions. Drawing parallels from literature and theater, we encounter the concept of estrangement, a technique employed by visionaries like H.P. Lovecraft and Bertolt Brecht to evoke a sense of unfamiliarity and dissonance in their works. Estrangement challenges conventional perspectives, inviting audiences to perceive reality through a new lens. Similarly, architects can harness the power of estrangement by embracing failure as a tool to disrupt traditional design paradigms, fostering imaginative solutions that defy expectations. Reflecting on history, we find inspiration in the words of Thomas Edison. "I have not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work." Edison's relentless pursuit of innovation underscores the transformative potential of failure. Each setback was not a defeat, but a stepping stone towards success. Similarly, architects must adopt Edison's mindset, viewing failures not as roadblocks but as opportunities for growth and exploration. As architects, we stand at the intersection of creativity and functionality, tasked with transforming abstract visions into tangible spaces. Failure, far from being a hindrance, is our ally in this endeavor. It serves as a catalyst for innovation, a muse for creativity, and a beacon of resilience. By embracing failure as an integral part of the design process, we unlock the door to boundless possibilities, propelling our profession into uncharted territory. We can take a lesson from neuroscience, literature, theater, and history as we navigate the complexities of architectural design. Let us embrace failure not as a sign of weakness, but as a testament to our capacity for growth and innovation. And let us remember the words of Thomas Edison as we embark on our creative journey. "I have not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work." Thank you.
You can join me up here. You can join me up here. Yeah. Wow, that was great. I just love the diverse perspectives that we have coming from our panelists. It's so great to have this kind of array of perspectives and backgrounds, and this is what brings the wealth of opportunity for our students to kind of learn and grow and appreciate these perspectives. So that's great. So it's hard for me to kind of even know where to begin here because there's just such a lot, so much wonderful stuff. But let me just start by talking about failure in terms of kind of a psychological aspect of this, where there's kind of it's broken up into two different categories. One is that when you're an early knowledge worker, failure becomes something that is discouraging, right? Where when you get bad feedback, when you get negative feedback, you're thinking, wow, it makes you want to kind of quit, basically. But once you kind of go over this hump of someone who's dedicated and invested in a certain kind of knowledge work, then the negative feedback is actually welcomed and encouraged, because then it helps you kind of move quicker in this iterative process. So maybe I can just open it up to our distinguished guests here, and we can just talk about that and think about how we can help our students, because all of us are teaching. We can talk about how we can help our students to move past that hump of being invested in knowledge work, so that you can start considering how we can use that negative feedback to propel our progress.
So thank you for that. I'll respond. First, I want to say that all failures aren't created equally. And I feel that's a little asterisk I should have put on all of our talks, I think, which is some have catastrophic results immediately: losing a job, losing a home, losing your life savings. And others have less catastrophic effects. And I think I just want to be mindful that we're using failure to describe a breadth of things. The kinds of failures I think we were talking about mostly is failures you can learn from, not failures that will kill you. I think the thing is that more experience you get in life, the more you realize just how strong you are and how much you can sustain. So while there still is a spectrum of failures, and we all have them, of things that are really will literally end your life and things that are just opportunities for learning, I think your life experience allows you to look at them differently. But I want to make sure there are edge cases here, that there are some failures that are truly devastating. And I think I want to honor that. I'm not talking about those, at least. I think we're talking about ones that you can, that do not end your life or your well-being. But the older you get, the more you realize what you can conquer. And so there seems to be fewer and fewer of those.
I appreciate you saying that. This reminds me of the Futurist Manifesto, where they describe kind of taking their car into the ditch, and luckily they all walk away from it. But sometimes car accidents are not so lucky, right? So anyway, that's I think interesting. And then also reminds me of what Philip was talking about with his homeostasis, where sometimes we want this enclosure or protection, and sometimes we need a little bit more chaos as well, right? And then Matias, you were talking about the hallucinations, right? And I think that's kind of an interesting mode of this, where it's like those can be classified as computational failure in a way.
Yes, if I take up on that for a second, I agree with Elizabeth that there is like this differentiation between the catastrophic failure and maybe the failure that allows you to learn something. One example from architecture, which is very common, is this very human ability, for example, to turn a disadvantage, a failure, into a success. It happens in design all the time, right? Suddenly you have like a picture upside down and you're like, wow, I can use that. That's great. And that happens, for example, also a lot with these results coming out from machines, which are actually failures, and that AI would recognize as a mistake, but you as a human say, that's interesting. That's something I want to follow up with and use as a possibility. So failures also become opportunities.
Sure. Yeah, that's good. I'd like to also introduce my fellow faculty member, Beth Huffman here. She's going to be also helping with this discussion. So, Philip, did you say you wanted to add something there?
Yeah, I wonder whether I could give some comments about the emotional disposition of welcoming failure. I mean, and let me warmly agree, but also express some ambivalence about this. And I especially wonder how our young colleagues in the audience, the body of new students and emerging designers might react to this. On one hand, it seems to me that it's inevitable that I'm going to be perceived as a member of a deeply irresponsible generation who blithely changed the world and has, without understanding the impacts of manipulating nature and the world with profound technologies since the Second World War, and has been deeply irresponsible, let's say, and also has been extraordinarily privileged in doing so. Now, I mean, if those judgments are harsh, they're also true enough. And so I want to treat the subject of failure with great care here. And to my mind, planetary catastrophe and climate collapse means that we are in a state where we want to step extraordinarily carefully, slowly, in spite of it being an emergency, and with the utmost of care. And that suggests that we do not want failure. We want to verify, we need security, we need to stabilize, we need to become responsible, we need to understand our impacts. Those terms are not advocating failure at all. They're advocating great care and responsibility. I think also we could say that the question of how do we create life? How do we create the conditions for life to become stable are ones that we need to look at very carefully when we are acting as architects and designers. And it's in that sense that we start to see the need for opening things as opposed to only making closed shells and absolute boundaries around things, because I think it's very important to remind ourselves that nature does not know equilibrium. The only equilibrium exists in the state of death, never in the state of life. Life means that that life continually grows and opens, but it needs to be stable at the same time. In the state of happiness rather than fear, I think we can see that each of us actually is an organism that loves rolling down the hill and getting dizzy, or perhaps passing out a little bit and having amazing dreams, or perhaps even just dreaming and being frightened for a while and then coming awake and saying, wow, wasn't it amazing to have all of those things collapsing into each other? Those kind of instabilities, I think, are a hint about, I think, what Matias was speaking about when he was talking about the creative nature of estrangement, where learning and being curious is an essential component of becoming alive. But I guess my comment is intended to suggest that we step very carefully with this term, failure, today, mindful of the responsibility that we're carrying and the sense of great insecurity as well. That means that ambivalence is in the paint of this discussion, as opposed to an earlier generation where we were just welcoming derangement and estrangement.
Good points there, all of you. I think it's really important that we're mindful of these things. And so maybe framing the discussion in terms of failure, particularly in designing. But to your point, Philip, about kind of the environmental impacts of our decisions, and this kind of, and Elizabeth, you mentioned this as well, this qualitative and this quantitative necessity of understanding how our design decisions have further impacts. I think these are really kind of heavy things that we need to take into consideration for sure. Yeah. Mariana, do you have anything to add here?
Well, maybe I will build on your last statement, right, in terms of the weight of taking seriously our failures. And to me, that in the context of designing for social innovation purposes and working with communities in participatory ways, I think there's a measure of accountability we must take as designers, in terms of understanding that the pursuit of experimentation and that creative process that we so treasure, that leads us from that ambiguity or state of the unknown, right, to an outcome that can be very exciting. That process is a process of privilege to a certain degree, and how we carry that privilege as designers and architects when we're working in communities that are vulnerable becomes a very important consideration, and it's something that has to be kept top of mind when you embark in that kind of work.
Thank you for that. Since we have quite a few students here, I'm just curious. I find in my studio classes, a lot of times students are a little bit afraid to fail. So maybe they choose what's safe or what's known. I was wondering if any of you could speak to maybe a word of encouragement for students that are, in the beginning stages of design, how to push them not to fail, but to just be brave and take some risks with their designs. Does anybody have any thoughts or words of wisdom on that?
Matias, can you kind of help us out here?
Sorry, I was just thinking about, I'm sure you know Mythbusters, right? Mythbusters. And there's like one of the moderators of the show always said, failure is always an option. Mm-hmm. And I think this is it is a trivial sentence, but it's an important sentence when you're starting to design. Because I think, as we discussed already, I think Elizabeth touched on this, Philip touched on this, you learn through failures. If you do everything safe and correct, you probably are going to end up with something that might work, but also it's going to be probably very boring. So those mistakes that you do, and so, I remember even that some schools of architecture were encouraging this. When I was studying at the Angewandte, specifically in the studio of Wolf Briggs, he encouraged his students, for example, to take their models and throw them on the floor and see what happens, and rebuild that model exactly again for the next iteration of the project. So this sort of, it's almost like forcing the failure in some schools really push the idea of what the project can become further. And I think that's the idea behind it. It's not predicting exactly your outcome. It's about, through the iterative work on the mistakes, trying to figure out what your project actually is, not what it could be. Yeah. And I think that actually enhances and widens your possibilities in the design space a lot.
So I'm going to say in the class, I appreciate that you brought it back to the classroom, because that's very different than the larger global failures we were talking about before. And I think in the classroom, assuming that the professor's primary goal is learning, I think that the most important thing is to ask yourself what your goals as the student are. Is your goal to come up with a solution, or is your goal to develop a rigorous and robust design process that you can bring with you out into your career? And if your goal is the first, sure, do that simple thing that you know how to do. But if your goal is to really focus on developing a rigorous design process that's very strong, then you'll do something. You'll take the risk. The analogy I have is, I'm always fascinated by gymnasts, because I think they do crazy things, and I'm scared to death doing flips over things. And I think to myself, if they just did cartwheels, if they never got past the cartwheel, Simone Biles would not be an interesting athlete to watch. But she was willing to go out and do these things over and over and over again. And that's what made her as great as she was. So sometimes if I'm in the classroom, I'm doing kind of the conservative thinking. The analogy I make is, am I just doing a cartwheel that I already know how to do and I learned when I was 5? So making some kind of analogy for yourself of what it takes to be great, and pushing yourself beyond it is one strategy I might think of.
Mariana, can I pull you into this conversation? You've helped to organize whole school kind of structures here, right? So how do you kind of embed this culture of embracing kind of being courageous and kind of stepping outside of your comfort zone and trying things that are hard, trying things? How do you do that? How do you create that culture?
I think I don't create it single-handedly. I'm one, right? Organizations are made of collections of humans and people. So I think the first realization is being quite humble and understanding that it's really about the collective. But when we are in situations of leadership in our organizations, I think we are called to also be intentional and driving groups to make decisions, right? And my approach is very connected to this idea, what we talk a lot in management about appreciative inquiry, right? Thinking about looking at the strengths, where are the strengths that we have, and being open to thinking about moving from those strengths forward. And I think that makes people get excited about what can be. And in many ways, appreciative inquiry is a way of a very designerly way of seeing the world and change in organizations. We are, I believe, as a design community, inherently optimistic, right? We have that capacity of envisioning plural futures, what is not there, and we rely on optimism. And emotions, we know, are contagious, right? And so when you're trying to create change and create new things in organizations, starting from the best of ourselves and building from that can be a very empowering and contagious way to get things going. And I tend to rely on that approach.
Thank you. I have a question from the audience here that has been submitted. Let me just read this. Do you think there are more opportunities for learning from failure by using co-design process, working closely with communities? I can reread the question if you like. Do you think there are more opportunities for learning from failure by using a co-design process, working closely with communities?
Well, in the example, I'll just jump in. In the example I gave from our work a few years back, definitely it was that community co-design work that led to the innovation, led to the failure, led to the pushing through. But I don't believe things are, black and white necessarily. So it's a little bit hard to answer that question in a very generic way. But I would invite my fellow panelists to chime in here.
I would answer, I love that. Thank you. I would answer with complexity. It's about complexity. And the more complex a system is, the more opportunities there are for failure. And so whether the complexity is brought in by engaging in a very complicated service or a community of very different stakeholders with very different goals and maybe conflicting goals. So I really think yeah, failure is more likely the more complex a system is, the more unpredictable pieces there are, is my simplification of that. And then there's more responsibility. I want to just emphasize what Mariana said earlier. Getting involved in more complex systems means greater responsibility because there's many more people who are involved and who could be either positively or negatively impacted by the failures or the successes.
One of the kind of allures of a traditional academic setting is this ability to kind of fail in a vacuum without those ramifications a little bit, And I think hopefully the academic model is moving away from that, but for more inclusive, kind of community-oriented, utilitarian, functional things in the world that can be useful, even if they are art-based or but it just being more out in the community, I think, yeah. So talking about this element of community, let's talk about data sets and talk about data sets as like a representation of community for a second. So when I think about community in terms of computation, I think of like our data sets, for like a large language model or something like this, is basically a small representation of community. And so then when we design using computer-based methods, AI, etc., we then have this representation of community embedded in the results we get out. Matias, do you want to talk to that a little bit?
Yeah, thanks a lot about that, because funny enough, when you were talking about this community involvement, is the first things that I thought was about, how do you, capture certain ideas and concepts within a community. I mean, using community as part of the design, there's always the problem of either too many cooks or design by committee, which is always a problem. So you can, I think, circumvent that problem by using data sets of certain necessities, abilities, opinions, desires, and so on, that you can collect, and then basically through working with neural networks, you will come up with a solution, a design solution, which might even be surprising for the designer or even the community, because they didn't see that being within the frame of their requirements. Yeah, this I think is one of the advantages of working with these new AI methods, is that you can encapsulate an enormous amount of varying data, whether this is social, economical, political, financial, and so on, to produce something that might benefit the community even more than they were expecting it to do, which I think is one of the advantages. So to answer your question, I think we have a very powerful tool at hand that allows us to, let me put it this way, fail 1,000,000 times synthetically before we find the right solution, and that in a very short time frame. And this ability to sort of simulate failure through the use of data sets might be really interesting, because it allows us to fail in a safe space, which is the digital space, and then create whatever comes out of it in the physical realm successfully. So fail virtually, succeed in reality.
I think that could be a mantra or a motto or something, right? Fail digitally. And then, yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Maybe we could reflect on the actions of our own cognition, because the operations in our frontal cortex involve billions and trillions of potential cognitions, almost all of which are completely unacceptable, atrocious, in utter violation. And our acts of consciousness are, in fact, a very, very strong filter, which say, no, absolutely not that one. No, no, no. And thank goodness for this. And this, because of our own affinity with this, it suggests that the action of being able to have a very wide spectrum of possibility and then walking on the edge between chaos and order is a tremendously productive and utterly natural way to work. This requires some confidence, it's true, but the practice of generating curiosity, of finding out things that we don't already know and haven't already experienced, is a very specific craft that I think has a very important role to play in manipulation of new data sets. That is to say, machinic curiosity is I would suggest one of the coming practices that will really redeem our new emerging AI tools.
Yeah, appreciate that. That's a good place to think about. So I want to bring up some points from the conversation that we had with John Ronan and Richard Worsham last time in the panel discussion, and they were talking about we got into social media a little bit and started talking about, well, how much of your failure do you share on social, and to Richard Worsham was saying, as a motorcycle designer, that he has decided that in the process of his new models of motorcycles, he's going to have kind of an initial prototype, but then beyond that, they're going to document the entire process and share it. And by doing so, they allow for community engagement with the process in a way that they can observe and appreciate and kind of project that out into the world even further. And so that's just something to kind of talk about is just in dealing with, and actually Adam Bente, who's on the call with us here, he was the one who kind of brought that conversation to the forefront. He's a very accomplished sculptural installation artist, and so he's like thinking about, well, intellectual property and how do we kind of think about those conversations and problems and issues, as well as kind of this opportunity to kind of highlight our work in the process and share it. So let's get some thoughts on those ideas if we can.
I've done a lot of work in this area and thinking about this because a lot of my work is in human-computer interaction, and I think it really depends on what you're trying to get and what role you want social media and the community that follows you or of which you're a part, what kind of feedback you want from them. Like, do you want, what we found is when you put something on Behance, for example, some online creative community, that the best feedback you might get is, looks good. So you're not going to we've looked at a lot of feedback on a lot of these creative communities. People really don't invest the time to give critical and helpful feedback. So I think going on there and expecting critical feedback is not useful. So I personally wouldn't use that. I wouldn't expect something from a platform you couldn't. On the other hand, if you're, I'll give a concrete story. When I was coming up with the 5-minute talk for this, I wrote up the 5 minutes, and because I had it written up, I put it on LinkedIn, and within a week I had 22,000 impressions on the 5-minute talk you just saw. In contrast, that was in 1 week. In contrast, my most cited academic article has 1,500 citations, and I wrote that 11 years ago. So I think there's that, to be sure, I also post things that get, my mother likes them, and that's about it. So to be clear, that was exciting for me because I got a lot of feedback actually on the 5-minute talk that I just gave. But that was an example of, by sharing it out, I wasn't worried somebody was going to steal it, the idea. I was looking for feedback on it, and I got that. I got lucky from getting that. So I really think it's what are you looking for? Are you looking for affirmation? Are you looking for actual feedback? Are you just daring yourself to put it public so it becomes more real? Like what are you going for? And that would determine whether I put something on social media or not.
So I guess that's one aspect of the thing, this idea, but maybe other things are that to think about or to talk about here would be specifically like elements of well, maybe not social media as failure but just like highlighting the process as you go about it and using that as a way to engage with community as opposed to receive critical feedback per se. Because I think the critical feedback comes elsewhere probably most of the time, right? But anyway. Matias, so you share a lot. I follow. I'm in your realm of your circle of influence there, and like for example, the photo that you had up on your video is of a satellite image of a city that's your face, right? That's a kind of an AI generated image, and so we see I see kind of the things that you're posting about and. Specifically for you, maybe I'll just pull you out here, is being so public about kind of your thoughts and your ideas, that kind of opens you up to a new sense of vulnerability and a new potential for misstepping with your words or with what you produce or that kind of thing. And that creates more vulnerability. And how do you embrace that, or how do you handle that? How do you manage that?
I think that is very human to be vulnerable and to do mistakes. I mean, that's what makes us human, I think. So I mean, I don't know. I made it a habit long time ago already to share all of the work. I think that this is for architects. I think it's a missed opportunity not to do that, because I learned that basically from science. Scientists share a lot. But most of the time, of course, in forms of papers or data sets and so on. So they share their ideas, they share their content, they share the results, because they're hoping others can reproduce them and either prove their ideas or disprove them. And then he has to change his idea and go somewhere else. So what you were talking about, like this public opinion, there is, of course, the whole peer review process, right? Which you can actually, as an architect, participate in through writing papers and publishing and so on. Competitions, at the end of the day, are a form of peer review. Yeah. So I think we have this pressure, like any other discipline, to go out with our work and present it to others, because otherwise you do not get a project. So honestly, I think that the like sharing as much as possible on the one side makes it possible for you to somehow proliferate ideas that you have about architecture and confirm your findings if others can reproduce them. And there are certain areas in architecture where this is very well established, like the whole research on robotics that's happening in architecture around the world share their insights in different conferences to improve and move further with those ideas. And I think the more we do this as architects, probably the more it will benefit the entire field of architecture.
For sure.
Matias, when you raise that, and Spencer, speaking about sharing, I can imagine quite an ambivalence in the room, because on one hand we feel incredibly vulnerable and things, and maybe even gullible or being taken advantage of, and on the other hand, the sense of community and the wish to make a community is so strong in us. Jane Jacobs has a very interesting framework, the wonderful American writer, in her book from 1996 called Systems of Survival, where she talks about two syndromes, guardians and traders. And those two ideas are very curious, because they don't immediately map onto right-wing or left-wing politics. And instead, she talks about how sometimes it's really important to be righteous and to insist on things and to kind of defend ideas, being a guardian of something. And then she also says how much advantage there can be in trading and being open, and that can be a function of being commercial and making money and seeking to be an entrepreneur as well. So it doesn't necessarily map onto right and left at all. But she offers those things in the sense that sometimes when forces are very, very strong in us, it can make us more and more rigid and make us think that we need to be very, very strong and very powerful. Brittleness is what happens when we act that way. And the trouble with becoming very, very powerful and optimized and strong is that brittleness becomes even more of a kind of a syndrome. And so sometimes a very different attitude in which allowing things to wash through you, a kind of a festival of openness, like the ocean kind of passing through your body, becomes a really delicious sensation. It's rather difficult to get confident in it, but we can see it as an utterly natural kind of quality as well. And so I guess the idea is that both of those things in their time really matter. Let's respect the need to be a guardian sometimes, but also look at how much advantage there is in simple open trading.
Yeah. Let's see here. Should we take some comments from the
Can I build on Philip's question or comment? I love
Yes,
the
please.
Festival of Openness. I want to have one this weekend. Thank you, Philip. You're all invited. I think that's beautiful. And I want to say that I think there's, again, I'm going to bring this back to privilege a bit, which is if we feel safe and secure, we're more likely to have a festival of openness. And I say this, I was watching a toddler in a water table, just like joyfully throwing water all over the place. I would call that a festival of openness. And I would say that it's made possible because the child is clothed and was fed that morning and has this the kind of a sense of safety. And so I think they're connected is what I want to say. But you're all welcome to my festival of openness this weekend. I don't know what it'll involve, but you're welcome. I'm going to have one.
I think this is great. This is great. So let's take this back to the classroom and think about the water table as the classroom, essentially, right? In a way, right? So let's just kind of sit on that for a second and think about that. How do you guys do that? How do you make your classroom this water table?
Can I quickly ask what you mean by water table?
Just what I meant by it was just like playful, like learning through play and experimentation and like limited concern about getting wet or the consequences.
Yeah,
I mean,
a water table is like a safe space, basically.
a safe space. Well, one thing I do is I'm very blunt about sharing my things that didn't work, especially right away. One of my mentors years ago came in and the first thing he showed me was the pile of physical rejection letters he had received. And that was before everything was digital. And it imprinted on me that and one was from a week before, imprinted on me that this New York Times bestseller, award-winning author, researcher, teacher just failed last week. And so I try to really be honest with what I'm doing, not just what I've done in the past, but what I just experienced, what didn't just work for me right away. So to know that I am not past this. I'm with you all. And then another one I do is kind of a forcing function is I flip it on the head and sometimes force people to come in with bad ideas. I force them to come up with, 20 bad ideas. And like I say, no good ideas. They must be bad. And it's this wonderful freeing event in which people, because now they can't fail or failing is not just not doing it. And people come in with the most exciting ideas. And then we deconstruct that and figure out, oh, well, so what was that about? Well, it was really this fear of failure that was getting in the way. Anyway, those are two tricks I like to play.
Mm-hmm.
Tricks, they're, helpful tips.
I love this question, and it's made me reflect on the atmosphere I try to foster myself. I think that creating a sense of safety, and at the same time making it safe to radically break things, is really a very, very significant thing. I mean, so that a sense of humor and of irony and humility and profound listening are some of the qualities that are essential in order to allow a sense of sharing and the kind of vulnerability of new things to emerge. I also think that in order to discover things by breaking, I'm not so sure about Wolf Brix's technique. I experienced it myself, Matthias, when I spent time with him, and I don't really want my models to be broken. I'm sorry, but Picasso had a really wonderful technique that I think maybe it would be encouraging, which is that my understanding is that he practiced his painting, Pablo Picasso, by taking the canvas from the previous day and turning it upside down and then continuing for a while. And just that sheer sense of respecting the integrity of something, but somehow looking at it as a stranger, estrangement, again, what Matthias was saying earlier, is such a precious thing. I think that there's such a need somehow to see things afresh in a kind of revelation of an encounter. And it's a very, very difficult thing to do. So I like that technique anyway, respecting the thing, but somehow turning it upside down.
Well, actually, I think these are basically both the same technique, just with different levels of violence.
Well said.
Well, so okay, there's this state of flow. This is a common term, and it's kind of associated with being ultimately productive, like highly productive, being in the zone, accomplishing, or really being able to relish in this moment of creativity. And that's, I think, I hope that, I think that's what we're all trying to accomplish in our own creative practice, and also maybe trying to elicit in our students as well. And I would hope that even kind of breaking the model or turning the canvas upside down can contribute to that state of flow. And maybe the breaking the model makes you say, look, my effort is important, but it's just effort. And once I've spent that effort, it's under the bridge, and I might as well build on that. I might as well take that effort and just use it as shared as experience that I now have as kind of a quiver, an arrow in my quiver to be able to use for future decision making. And that's something that got us talking last time as well, about kind of being able to use our previous failures as something to be able to propel us further in the future, and specifically thinking about intuition as an important part of that, and building intuition, and that kind of allowing us to make better decisions in the future. And we'll still have to deal with kind of bad decisions moving forward, because we're hopefully always growing and progressing. But if we have this intuition built up, it allows us to not make the same decision, not make the same mistakes twice. And even further than that, maybe we can even think about how building on the bad choices of others, or like the successes through the bad choices of others, can propel us even further. So maybe we can just discuss that a little bit. Mariana, what do you think?
Yes, I'm thinking, about your point about intuition and how important it is. We all have that inner voice that connects to the worldview, the mental models we have. And I think it's important to be in tune with it. It's also important, and I think as we get older and fail more and learn from those failures, we also learn to regulate and calibrate that intuition with some real hard work and analytical work, and understanding that sometimes, well, we had an intuition for something, but it might be actually too narrow, and
Could be
it's
wrong,
not
yeah.
allowing us to push ourselves to innovate enough. So yes, I think it's an interesting balancing act, respecting, being in tune with it, but also understanding that there's a process of openness and playfulness and experimentation and failure that might prove us wrong, that first intuition was actually not necessarily sufficiently grounded.
Yeah,
That's
well,
a reflection.
Yeah, I guess what I was trying to talk about was, I mean, yes, there's this kind of initial intuition, but I guess maybe I'm talking about intuition that's built up after testing, right? Where through testing we're then able to better gain intuition about a kind of a range of problems and how we can address those
Yes.
problems. But your point is still quite valid, where it's like, okay, we have this initial intuition and we should test that initial intuition, but also by testing it, hopefully we find the holes in it as well. Yeah.
So Spencer, I'll react to your comment in that the lessons I learn every day from my children, of which are approaching the age of the people in the room, despite my built up intuition over many, many years and thinking that I know how something's going to work, I always try and feeling pretty good about things. I always try and go into a situation when I'm, let's say, co-designing with my kids, and say, well, this is what my intuition says, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's not going to work out this time. Maybe my kid's intuition is actually right on this. And I have an open conversation with them. And of course, they're delighted when they end up being right. And as am I, because it's a constant reminder to me that just because I have 30 more years of experience with them doesn't mean that I'm sensitive to all the complexity or the situation in a way that they are. They're aware of things that I'm not aware of. So I think we all bring intuition to, I guess my statement is we all bring intuition to a environment. And it's not just based on number of years you've been, but also just what your lived experience is and where you've all come. So when working in teams, I would just say respect your intuition while also being open to others. Maybe it's more about a team situation. I think it's really important. I see teams really break up when somebody thinks their intuition is the right one, and the only one.
Yeah, and it's interesting because that intuition is kind of this amorphous thing, and it's very much based on our own perspective of the world, right? And so sometimes even if we've done testing, and we're then taking this intuition from the testing, we can still have a wrong intuition, right? Like, and that is something that's a little scary because you want to actually even question your own intuition at times, for sure.
My favorite phrase is having strong opinions weakly held, or strong intuitions weakly held, which is like going in with a point of view and a strong conviction of what's going to happen. But if it doesn't happen that way, being willing to shift.
The quality of intuition is a very tantalizing one, relating to the subject of failure, and it reminds me of Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi's older book called Flow, which I think you were invoking, Spencer. In that book, which really speaks about qualities where intuition is fundamental. He talks about pareidolia. Pareidolia is that kind of delicious, wonderful, awful sense in which we hallucinate paths and forms, and once you see the ducky or the horsey in the cloud, you can't unsee it, even though it's your own projection. This very curious sense that we are making our way and hallucinating our way at the same time. And what does that say about intuition, about seeing truth? One path could say that we're always fooling ourselves, and at the other path could say that we're actually creating the possibility of seeing something by empathizing it and moving it forward. I think that what authors like Csikszentmihalyi say in relation to that, in the ambivalence, is that this back and forth kind of flow between giving yourself the benefit of the doubt and then also being a bit sturdy and giving yourself a poke and looking at things is actually the human condition itself. In other words, it is precisely the condition of ambivalence that is the place where we can work. And so that suggests that the possibilities continually collapse before us, and yet they keep on being formed. We can have a confidence that we're constantly creating the paths. In other words, that failure is an inherent part of forming meaningful understanding.
Thank you for that. Any students, you guys have any questions or as we wrap this up? Statements?
I actually wanted to kind of further the question of intuition and specifically bringing Matias into the conversation with his expertise in AI and say, do computational processes have intuition? Does AI have intuition? You know, this is, I think, a pretty nascent question right now, actually.
That is a great question. That's a great question. I mean, I have to put something before that. Like,
Sure.
What most of the things that are done in AI are basically based on our understanding of certain neurological processes, right? We have a little bit of an understanding how perception works. We have a little bit of an understanding how hallucinations work, how dreaming works. Yeah. So, and we can put this in math and then create an algorithm out of it. We do not understand how intuition works in terms of neuroscience entirely, right? It's similar with things like creativity. Like everyone's like, oh, AI can be creative. Actually, no. We do not understand exactly what happens neurologically speaking when we have a creative thought. So we cannot put that in math and we cannot synthesize it. However, what is interesting is this sort of relationship or collision, if you want, of the human mind and synthetic things, right? So what Philip was describing, pareidolia, for example, is a really interesting example because what happens neurologically speaking when we have those visions of, oh, I see the sheep in the cloud or faces everywhere in every shape is because our brain is completely trained towards pattern recognition. That's what we do all the time. And sometimes we overdo it. And that's when we have pareidolia. Yeah. And machines can do these sort of things too, right? So we can actually push machines to hallucinate. We discussed this a couple of times today, which is similar to creating like this over performance in terms of pattern recognition in machines. So this is a very interesting point because you might have heard the term uncanny valley, right? Which means that our ability, the ability of our cognition to recognize that an artificially created face, for example, is not real, right? But the machines are getting better and better and providing things that are already outside the uncanny valley that look really realistic. Yeah. So to your point about intuition, I'm not sure if machines have intuition, but they can certainly push our own intuition. I would say that's for me the interesting point is that those sensibilities, intuitions, talents, creativities that are profoundly human can be enhanced and widened by the use of neural networks and AI. Does that answer your question? Not entirely sure, but hopefully.
Yeah, I think so. I think that there's more to be discussed there, like specifically getting into the technicalities, but that's maybe for another day, obviously. But it's good to have these conversations, and I think that all of us have brought like a really interesting perspective, and our distinguished panel have wealth of information and backgrounds that they're pulling from. I just want to open it up to each of you and just see if you have any additional comments before we close. Not closing comments, but comments to just to continue the conversation before we get to that final ending.
Maybe
I
just
think
go ahead.
Go ahead, Phil. Oh, okay.
No, please, Elizabeth.
One thing that's been loosely talked about, but I want to bring out and maybe make more bold is this idea of kindness to yourself. And I think we are in a society in which we can very easily see what other people are doing and engage in social comparison and see that everybody else is successful all of the time. Of course, that's just their projection. But that we are kind with ourselves and own and recognize that we all bring unique perspectives to the world. That's why we're here. There is nobody else like us. And so keeping, rather than trying to be like anybody else, really be kind to yourself in figuring out the best version of you can be. I think that's something I'm hearing in all of this. And I am confident that every one of you will be on the screen being interviewed 30 years from now, hearing about, if you do that, I'm confident each of you will find your path to success. Maybe those are closing comments, but I want the kindness to come out, not just the roughness. So please be kind to yourself.
Philip, you had some things to say.
Adding to what Elizabeth has just said, because I so profoundly agree with that. I think that failure can always be associated with our natural imposter syndrome that each of us always has as a human being. Our aggressive defensiveness, one of the cruelest but most prevalent attitudes where we hurt or where we push because we are insecure ourselves. The sense that things are in fact truly precarious, that ambivalence is a state of wisdom rather than a state of vulnerability, is a tremendously helpful sensibility. And that can be found through fostering senses of humor, where failures can contribute to irony, where sarcasm can somehow open things, and where the deep ironies of life are somehow a contribution to ultimate truth. In other words, tragedy and comedy are really very, very much intertwined in our search for meaning. So failures can be so very helpful in understanding really profound things that are actually enabling.
I actually wanted to shamelessly borrow from Elizabeth's introduction video. I really like the acronym that she used for FAIL.
I like
feel,
that.
Feel, accept, ignite, and learn. And I can totally empathize with that. I wanted, however, to add that I think it's a question of timing too. Feel and accept, keep that short. Ignite and learn, keep that long. And I think that might be a successful way to use failure.
That's great.
See, I'm building on these beautiful comments, and I think on an idea that we talked about earlier, right? This idea of how do we create trust and safety in our classrooms. There's a beautiful scholar, Amy Edmondson, that my students get to read a lot. She's a professor at Harvard. She's responsible for, to a great degree, coining this concept of psychological safety, right? How do we create spaces with one another for trust? And she talks about the right kind of wrong by talking about failure. That's the title of her latest book. And I think celebrating, creating spaces where we can be kind, where we can trust each other, where we can embrace our imposter syndrome, right? And understand our limitations, and zero in on the profound disorientation that emerges when we don't have all the answers, and feel our way through being a bit more resilient from that disorientation and that sense of feeling lost for a bit. It's a healthy, I think it's ultimately very, very healthy, and it makes us stronger. It's scary, but it does make us stronger if we do it over and over and over again. So I would encourage you to embrace it and not run away from it.
These are great admonitions. So I just wanted to thank our audience specifically for stepping outside of your kind of silos. If you maybe hopefully you don't have silos, but stepping outside of like your main focus in research and the talking points that you spend most of your time on, to talk about something a little bit broader. And I think this is one of the opportunities that comprehensive design provides us. This program at IU here, it provides us this opportunity to bring in the experts from so many different disciplines and say, how do these disciplines and the expertise overlap and create something more beautiful in the world? I think that's an important thing to think about. And so that's one thing that I think is a testament to this program in the way that it's been organized in its decidedly ambiguous kind of scale, and maybe even other elements, but creating this place for students and the future of humanity to think about how we can use this cross-disciplinary, cross-scale human-centered focused process. And I think that you as a panel embody that really, really well. And so, you know, it's a great credit to us here to be able to be in your presence today and to be able to experience your wisdom and your background and your knowledge and intuition, and sharing those ideas with us, specifically dealing with this idea of failure. And I just wanted to say that we've asked you to come and speak to us today because we feel like that you provide a lot of value, and we're looking forward to continuing the conversation with each one of you moving forward. And we're very excited that you've spent your time with us today, and we look forward to the day when we can host you in person on campus as well. So let's keep those opportunities open, and thank you so much for your time today. It's been really a pleasure. So
Thank you. A real pleasure.
Thank you.
With that, I think we're going to close, and I just am grateful for everyone who's been here today, everyone who's joined us online, and also the live stream which has been on YouTube. We've had several people joining us there, and then we'll have this recorded, and it will be posted on the IU website in the comprehensive designs kind of repository of lectures. So we'll have this recorded for that purpose as well. So thank you so much, and looking forward to seeing you again soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, and thank you.